Okay. It's been just about 1 week since the election, and I know you were all still digesting that and processing that, and that is all going to take some time, and you should take your time doing that. Meanwhile, there's also a lot happening here in Washington as Donald Trump's second term starts to take shape. And we're going to talk about all of that tonight and what it means for all of us, because it's important for all of you to know, and also what the most effective guardrails against it might be. I mean, those guardrails might be Democratic governors, so we're going to talk to one of them, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, who has some experience governing during a Trump term. We're going to talk to her in just a few minutes. Those guardrails could be lawyers, so we're going to talk to one of the best in the country, Cheryl Eiffel. And those guardrails could be members of Congress, so we're going to talk to one of them, too, Congressman Dan Goldman. We're going to talk to him later in the show. But I do want to start tonight with a bit of a look at the people Trump is choosing to serve in his administration right now, because they tell us a lot about what his second shot at the White House could look like. And that knowledge of who they are and what their intentions are is really important as we all figure out the path forward here. So today, Trump tapped Tom Homan, his former acting ICE director, as his border czar. And Trump is expected to name immigration hardliner Stephen Miller. You know that guy. His get out the vote message last week was vote to end the invasion. That was his get out the vote message. That guy is going to take over the role of deputy chief of staff for policy. Now, those are two people who clearly have made very abundantly clear they have every intention of taking the most aggressive, most inhumane approach to immigration policy possible. And while you've probably heard a lot over the years about Stephen Miller, I bet, you probably haven't heard as much about Tom Homan. So I just want to give you a little insight into who that guy is. I mean, this is a guy who backed Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy during his first term, which, of course, resulted in thousands of families being separated at the southern border. He was a contributor to Project 2025's mandate for leadership. Yeah, you know, that 900-page bigoted blueprint to overhaul the federal government. That was all online. He said just a few months ago that migrants, quote, ain't seen shit yet. Wait until 2025. That's his quote, not mine. And he also said this in an interview with 60 Minutes right before the election.
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
And Tom Homan, the guy you just saw there, and Stephen Miller are just two in the growing cast of pretty scary characters Trump is adding to his inner circle. Just moments ago, we learned Trump selected Congressman Mike Waltz to be his national security advisor, not a Senate-confirmed job. Waltz is a Trump loyalist, an election denier, and a NATO critic who echoes Trump's skepticism about supporting Ukraine. Earlier today, Trump selected Congresswoman Elise Stefanik for UN ambassador. She's, of course, a moderate total MAGA loyalist. She's going to be filling the job that Nikki Haley had during the first Trump administration. Oh, and the guy rumored to be in the running for CIA or FBI director is Kash Patel. Now, The Atlantic wrote recently about him, quote, that even in an administration full of loyalists, Patel was exceptional in his devotion. It's quite a mantle. Now, each of these choices really tells us something about Trump's vision of a second term because of what they all have in common. They're all pure loyalists, of course. They're MAGA devotees. They're people who will carry out Trump's wildest wishes without a second thought. But beyond that, these are people who share Trump's king-like view that executive power should be limitless. I mean, do you remember the kinds of things Stephen Miller had to say at the beginning of Trump's first term? We do.
The powers of the president to protect our country are very substantial and will not be questioned.
His power will not be questioned. So just to recap the situation here in Washington, D.C., piece by piece, we are watching Trump hire a fiercely loyal staff who view the power of the presidency as unlimited. At the same time, he will have a Republican Senate, and he will very likely have a Republican House of Representatives. All of that's scary, and I'm sorry to be so direct about all of it. But what it means is that one of the last best checks for Democrats will be in states where there are Democratic governors. And just 1 week after the election, we're already hearing from some of them. California Governor Gavin Newsom said his state is ready to fight, and he called for a special legislative session to devote more resources to counter Republican policies around immigration, the environment, LGBTQ+ rights, and reproductive care. New York Governor Kathy Hochul also convened a team of experts to develop strategies to protect her state from policy threats. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker promised, if you come for my people, you come through me. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said in response to a question about mass deportations, if it's contrary to our values, we will fight to the death. And Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey had this to say to our own Lawrence O'Donnell last week.
If the Trump administration requests it, would the Massachusetts State Police assist in mass deportations?
No, absolutely not.
Now, the brand new border czar, Tom Homan, seemed to respond to Democratic governors like Maura Healey on Fox News just this morning. Take a listen.
I've seen some of these Democratic governors say they're going to stand in the way. They're going to make it hard for us. Well, a suggestion: if you're not going to help us, get the hell out of the way, if we're going to do it.
Get the hell out of the way. He hasn't even started yet. First of all, sorry, Tom Homan, that's not really how government works. Second of all, he might be talking to the wrong governor. I mean, Maura Healey sued Trump nearly 100 times as Massachusetts Attorney General during the first Trump term. She took immediate action and stockpiled mifepristone during the legal battle over the pill in the wake of Dobbs. And she has said that this time, during this term, she is once again ready to hold the line. Joining me now is the Democratic governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. It's great to see you, Governor Healey. There's so much I want to get to, but you're one of the governors, as I just outlined, with a lot of experience governing during a Trump presidency. And I just played that sound from Tom Homan, who Trump announced will be the new border czar, warning governors like you that oppose their planned mass deportation operation to, quote, get the hell out of the way. That's his quote. You talked a lot about, I was sitting on the set when you were talking to Lawrence O'Donnell. You talked about tools in the toolbox, that you're ready to fight back. I get this question from a lot of friends. So what exactly can a governor like you do to stop actions like mass deportation?
Well, good evening, Jen, and let me say happy Veterans Day to all out there. You know, I started my day at a veterans service, and I just think it's important in this time, especially, that we recognize those who have served and those who are serving now. Look, I'll tell you how I see it, Jen, okay? It's interesting, the comments of the new or soon-to-be ICE director. He is right about one thing, that federal immigration enforcement is the job of federal authorities. And as a former attorney general and now as governor, I agree with that. That is the case. So it's up to the new Trump administration and federal authorities to figure out how they're going to implement and what they're going to implement when it comes to immigration enforcement. As a governor, and I think this is a view shared by both Democratic governors and Republican governors, what we hope the president-elect prioritizes is fixing the border, right? He had an opportunity to do that a year ago. Instead, he blew that up when it looked like a bipartisan deal was ready to be inked and signed. But that really needs to happen. We need reform at the border. We need more agents. We need to cut down on fentanyl trafficking. And we need more resources there. So as a governor of a state, I have no immigration enforcement authority. I sure hope that there is attention paid. But I also say more broadly, Jen, I think the job of governors, we're elected to serve our citizens. In Massachusetts, I'm focused on delivering for the things that my residents care about. They want to see lower costs, more affordable housing, access to health care, access to education, right? We also are a state where many laws and protections are already enshrined in law. Our Constitution, for example, protects clean air, clean water. We have laws that are strong when it comes to protecting against discrimination and ensuring that women have access to abortion and reproductive health care. So, as governor, I'm going to make sure that I defend the rights, the freedoms that people here in Massachusetts are entitled to under law. And that includes in the face of any attempted federal overreach. But I'm also going to stay focused on the things that matter to citizens here, which are those things that I just outlined.
I know there, and I'm so grateful for you to raising that as Veterans Day. So grateful for all the veterans who have served, and I know you have so many things you focus on. I wanted to ask you about this because it's so front and center for people. And if the estimates are right, and you tell me there are about 250,000 undocumented immigrants living in your state, and you tell me if that's not the right number. And I imagine many of them are legitimately afraid of what might happen, and they look at you as this very fierce and strong governor, not afraid to fight back. You're not overseeing federal enforcement, but I guess the question is there anything that can be done, or what do you tell them when they ask you about these repeated commitments to mass deportations?
Look, I think we've got to see what President-elect Trump actually does, because it's one thing to make a bunch of promises and statements during the course of a campaign. It's another thing to actually operationalize and implement. Again, with respect to the issue of immigration, this really is a federal issue that cries out for a solution on the border. I certainly have, as both a civil rights attorney and also as a former attorney general, been really clear about the need to protect people's rights here in the state. But, I think what Americans and people in Massachusetts are looking for are sensible, common sense ways forward, right? Not vilification, not scaring the hell out of people. I mean, it just really depends, right? We have students here, we have families here, some who've been here for decades, right? Who may not be here lawfully. I mean, they're working. I don't know what the president is going to do or the impact of that on the economy. But, as I say, I'm going to stay steady. I'm going to stay focused on my job, which is to lower costs. I cut taxes last year. We're building more housing. I'm going to sign a great economic development bill shortly. And yes, in the face of any federal actor, including the president or his administration, who interferes with what are states' rights when it comes to protecting abortion, protecting access to public education here, protecting access to health care here, will certainly stand up and fight against that. And I imagine you'd see governors in other states doing the same if that were to happen to them.
Let me ask you about something else that you did that I thought was pretty bold and courageous. I know a lot of women in your state were appreciative of. I mean, you directed your state to stockpile mifepristone after the legal fight over the FDA's approval for the drug last year. And the Supreme Court this summer did protect against the drug, but given the new administration, is that something you're thinking about, your administration is talking about, stockpiling more or taking other steps, given we don't know where that will head? And I agree with you, we don't want to scare people, but I know you and others are preparing for what could happen and what Trump and his administration are saying they might want to try to do.
Yeah, and you asked a little while ago about the extent of a governor's power. This is a good example, Jen. I was very concerned as the case was pending before the Supreme Court that we were going to see access to medication abortion taken away in this country. And I wanted to do everything I could to protect women in Massachusetts, to protect healthcare providers in Massachusetts. So yes, we stockpiled medication abortion so that we have a supply at the ready. Now, of course, the court ended up not taking that away. But, we want to be ready. And that's how I operate as governor. I was proud to be able to be part of signing into law a law that's going to protect abortion and healthcare, women's healthcare providers from liability, because Americans everywhere, especially in Massachusetts, one thing is clear, and it's also in our Constitution. Women are entitled to abortion care, health care that they need. And so as governor, I am absolutely going to do everything in my power to make sure they have that access. And I was really heartened the other night to see so many states, so many people vote for that reproductive freedom in their own states.
7 states, including some that went for Trump. It tells you a lot about abortion rights and interest in that in this country. Governor Maura Healey, I know how much you have on your plate.
Yeah.
Happy Veterans Day. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. I really appreciate it. The immigration proposals is a promise to issue an executive order to end birthright citizenship in America. And yesterday, I asked former acting U.S. Solicitor General Neil Katyal if that was possible. He also promised to sign an executive order on day one to end birthright citizenship in the United States. Can he do that via executive order?
No. Last I checked, the president can't override the Constitution. The 14th Amendment is as clear as day that there is no way he can do that. If he tries that, he will lose in court every day of the week.
Few people know the law better. Neil's, of course, 100% correct about the law. And since birthright citizenship was enshrined into the Constitution with the 14th Amendment, all 3 branches of government, regardless of the party in power, have consistently concluded that it applies to children born on U.S. soil, children born to citizens and migrants alike. Even Trump-appointed Judge James Ho, a member of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, whose opinions have at times been too extreme for the conservative justices on the Supreme Court, defended birthright citizenship back in 2006, saying, quote, "Text and history confirm that the citizenship clause reaches all persons who are subject to U.S. jurisdiction and laws, regardless of race or alienage." But that was then. And today, that very same judge who wrote that floated a new loophole that will be music to Trump's ears. In an interview with Reason Magazine, Judge Ho said, quote, birthright citizenship obviously doesn't apply in case of war or invasion. It's quite a broad definition. Joining me now is Sherilyn Ifill. She is the former president and director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She's now the Vernon Jordan Endowed Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University. Sherilyn, it's so great to see you. I ran into you last week. It's always great to see you, hear your straight talk.
Yeah.
So Neil was pretty confident that Trump's executive order to ban birthright citizenship openly goes against the Constitution and precedent, and that it, that I would assume you agree with that analysis of the law. The rebuttal I've seen to that is essentially, well, that hasn't stopped some right-wing courts before with loopholes being floated. There was one I just floated from Judge Ho that migrants aren't migrants, but instead foreign invaders. What do you make of the powers? Again, I just was talking to Maura Healey. I don't want to scare anyone, but I want people to be very clear about what's happening here and what people will try to do over the next couple of years. So what do you make of that? And how do you think the judiciary could analyze this with Trump and his administration?
Yeah, I think you're asking the right question, Jen, and thanks for having me on. Neil is absolutely right. The first line of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution is every person born or naturalized in the United States is a citizen of the United States and in the state where they reside. The language couldn't be clearer. It's unequivocal. Birthright citizenship was, created and ratified to ensure that Black people, both free and newly freed, would be citizens after the Dred Scott decision and after the end of the Civil War. That's who it was intended for. But of course, tens of millions of now Americans and their families have benefited from birthright citizenship, including waves and waves of European immigrants in the 20th century. But there has been this continuous call by those on the right and to talk about birthright citizenship as though it is a policy choice rather than a constitutional imperative. And so you're seeing more of that here with Trump believing he can, by executive order, sign it away. I think he knows, and I'm sure that those around him know, that an executive order cannot trump a constitutional provision. What he is counting on is the investment that those on the extremist right have made in the federal courts, including the Supreme Court. And what they are hoping is that what you were describing as a loophole would be reinterpreted by the Supreme Court. The court has been clear in the past, more than 100 years ago, that the loophole that Ho is referring to really was meant to deal with the children of diplomats who are assigned to this country. Those children who are born here are not citizens because the diplomats are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They have diplomatic immunity. This has nothing to do with migrants who are born in this country. But the invasion language, that's the important part, Jen. This is the effort to do this mass denaturalization that Trump's right-hand acolyte, Stephen Miller, has talked about. Denaturalization is a process that can happen if there's been some willful misleading or there has been some fraud or some other criminal activity that made someone not really eligible for naturalization who was naturalized. But it's used in time of war. It is not used in time of peace. But because there is also this loophole in that statute, that 1798 Alien Enemies Act, that talks about invasion or predatory incursion, that is what they have been building up to. That's been the reason for the migrant talk. That's been the reason for the, they eat the pets. All of this has been laying the foundation to try and get the Supreme Court to see the migrants coming from Central America and from South America to see that as an invasion of some kind, to see that as a kind of predatory act. There's going to be an effort to talk about gangs. This goes back to Aurora, Colorado. This is why Trump said he's going to start his process in Aurora, the effort to suggest that gangs have taken over apartment buildings. This is all an effort to lay the foundation for the concept that we are somehow being invaded by migrants. You've heard many on the right use that language, that this is a predatory incursion. And I would love to be able to tell you that the Supreme Court would reject that out of hand. I want to tell you that, but frankly, I can't tell you that. I would just recall for people that, the most famous use of the Alien Enemies Act was the Japanese internment. Now, the Supreme Court has said that the Korematsu decision was overturned in the court of history. There is no such thing as a court of history. It has not been overturned in the United States Supreme Court. And so I think we should worry, and I think we should be concerned. I know that the American Civil Liberties Union and other immigration organizations are ready and have been preparing for this for years because they take it very seriously. But I think this is going to be the effort to try to get this up to the Supreme Court and hope that the Supreme Court will step far out of line and far away from history and tradition, the history and tradition of birthright citizenship, and make some effort to read the Alien Enemies Act in a way that was clearly not intended by Congress. This is all part of the effort of this administration, this incoming administration, to show itself to be more powerful than our Constitution. And the only way they can do that is with the acquiescence of our federal courts and the United States Supreme Court. So everything that Trump says he is planning to do really is a test for our courts and for the Supreme Court. And I think all of us, given what's happened in the last few years, have reason to be concerned.
Thank you for that amazing explanation. I don't know how everything is in your head, but I think it's so important for us all to be informed right now. And hopefully all these things don't happen, but let's be informed about it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, this is obviously just one of the areas in which Donald Trump is trying to test the system. And I want to ask you about another, because right now Trump is demanding that Republican senators who want to be majority leader, the election is a silent ballot, it's this week, support recess appointments for his nominees, which is basically a way, I mean, for presidents to bypass Congress, to get their people in place. It's a process. It's been used in the past, just to be clear. And it looks like Trump is also going to have a fairly comfortable majority in the Senate. But I know this caught your attention, and I don't want to let anything slip by for what people should understand. So why did it catch your attention, and why is it something that you're concerned about?
Well, once again, as you pointed out, Jen, it looks like President Trump is going to have a comfortable majority in the Senate to be able to get his cabinet confirmed. That's not good enough for him. Because what he doesn't want is to go through the process of confirmation hearings in which Democratic senators will have a chance to expose the inadequacies and extremism of some of the nominees that he is planning to put in his cabinet. So what he wants is to have those positions filled by recess appointments. Recess appointments are temporary appointments for a year, and they're usually used after someone has been through the process for a very long time and the Senate is in a logjam. This preemptive effort to install cabinet members by recess appointments, this is a Trump feature. And this is because Trump does not want that exposure of the kind of people that he is going to nominate. So that's number one. Number two, what he wants is, again, to flex against the constitutional order. The constitutional order is that the president nominates and the Senate has the power to confirm. That is a power that the Senate holds as part of the Constitution. Trump is placing himself above the Constitution. This is the ultimate authoritarian move to say that I am more important, I am more powerful than this document that you all revere. And the more he gets away with it, the more he hopes to cow those around him. Already, he's made this a condition for anybody wanting to be Senate Majority Leader. And of course, he has his right-hand person, Elon Musk, helping him with this. So this is a dangerous move. And it's designed to make us believe that he is the ultimate authority.
I never thought about the piece of not having them question that. So we've clearly been exploring all the different branches of government and the different checks on Trump. And one of them is potentially the House. Now, Republicans are on track to keep control of the House, and that means people like Jim Jordan are gearing up to deliver for their boss, you know, Donald Trump. Jordan sent a letter to Special Counsel Jack Smith just days after the election last week, demanding that Smith preserve all records related to his prosecutions of Trump. Now, a notice like that is usually the first step toward launching a congressional investigation. And when asked about it yesterday, he notably did not rule out calling on Smith to testify. So I think we can all guess where this may be headed. We'll see. But when it comes to Trump's intentions, Jordan insisted that he doesn't think the incoming president will actually try to prosecute his perceived enemies, despite, of course, Trump's promise to prosecute his enemies repeatedly. Now, that would all be quite a welcome surprise if that happened. But then you listen to people like Mike Davis, a conservative lawyer and close ally of Donald Trump's. Just listen to how Davis threatened New York Attorney General Letitia James, who won a massive civil judgment against Trump for business fraud just earlier this year.
Let me just say this to Big Tish James, the New York Attorney General. I dare you to try to continue your lawfare against President Trump in his second term, because listen here, sweetheart, we're not messing around this time, and we will put your fat ass in prison for conspiracy against rights. And I promise you that.
First of all, that guy sure seems like someone you'd want to bring home to mom, doesn't he? Well, that same gentlemanly fellow has reportedly been floated for the job of Attorney General. We will see. And Trump has said publicly that he wants him to serve in a, quote, very high capacity, regardless of what that is. So look, we should all be ready to believe Trump's own words when he promises an agenda of so-called retribution. Though I have to say the word is a misnomer in this context. Retribution implies that the people holding Trump accountable were wrong to do so, and they most certainly were not. Joining me now is someone who is in Congress. He will have a big role, Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman of New York, who sits on the House Judiciary Committee. It's great to see you. Let me just start with Jim Jordan. I mean, he's pretending, I guess, that we all haven't watched the last 8 years transpire. But what are you and other Democrats in the committee preparing for? Because this is part of what you're doing in this stage, right? In terms of the possibility of law enforcement officials like Letitia James or Jack Smith or even others being called to testify.
Well, first, it is an absolute disgrace that Donald Trump seems like he's going to escape accountability for his federal cases because of the DOJ policy that DOJ cannot prosecute a sitting president. This was very clearly what Trump's primary goal was in running for president, was to evade that accountability. And already we've seen indications from Jack Smith that he's going to do that. But it does not mean that we should not get a full accounting of the conduct, including in a report. And I agree with Chairman Jordan. We should know everything about this investigation. We should know whether or not there was General Garland or President Biden. Remember, this is the Biden Department of Justice that prosecuted President Biden's son, Hunter Biden. So this notion of lawfare or weaponization is pure projection and total bunk. But I agree. I think that Congress's role is to understand everything about the special counsel's investigations of Donald Trump. And so I do hope Chairman Jordan goes forward with that investigation.
Now, I have talked to you a lot on this show. I'm not sure I've ever heard you agree with Jim Jordan, but this is a time for that. It does feel like you may have slightly different objectives here in terms of what you want to get down to the bottom of with Jack Smith. My bet is he's a pretty effective person during a hearing. You may get to the bottom of what actually happened here and really clear up some absurd conspiracy theories. Could it backfire for Jim Jordan? I mean, there might be stuff he doesn't want out there. Probably will be stuff.
Well, look, I mean, they've made all sorts of allegations, Jim Jordan and Donald Trump and everybody else, that this is a purely politicized investigation. Both investigations are, and that it is just to get Donald Trump, the political opponent of Joe Biden. If that's the case, once the special counsel's investigation is over, there is no reason for the special counsel or the Department of Justice to withhold information from Congress. And it is incumbent upon Congress to get that information. That's what they did with special counsel Durham. That's what they did with special counsel Robert Mueller. That's what they did with special counsel Robert Hur. This is how it has come to work in Congress, which is what our role is. Our role should be to get to the bottom, to hold the Department of Justice accountable. And so whatever the facts are, if there was weaponization and partisan efforts to get Donald Trump, then we should know about it. And if there weren't, we should also know about it.
Are there, I mean, a lot of the appointed officials and nominated officials who are in the Department of Justice are about to be out of office in a couple of months. Are there others you'd like to see testify before Congress about this?
Look, I will tell you that I'm eager for all of them to come and testify. I urge Chairman Jordan to actually get to the bottom of the allegations. They have made numerous allegations that are not supported at this point by any evidence. So as you would do with allegations, you investigate them. The way to investigate them would be to call witnesses, to get documents, and so we can uncover whether or not there is any legitimacy to these allegations, or whether or not they just like to make those allegations and not investigate them, because we saw what happened with the impeachment investigation in the Oversight Committee.
Số 3, các bạn sẽ móc cho mình một mẫu đơn, sau đó là 2 mẫu đơn trên một chân. Chúng ta sẽ lặp lại 6 lần. Số 4, các bạn sẽ móc cho mình cụ 2 mẫu đơn liên tiếp và 2 mẫu đơn trên một chân. Chúng ta sẽ làm lại cụ này đến hết hàng. Số 5, chúng ta sẽ móc cụ 3 mẫu đơn liên tiếp và 2 mẫu đơn trên một chân. Từ hàng số 6 đến hàng số 10, mỗi hàng các bạn sẽ móc cho mình 30 mẫu đơn.